Alrighty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the SAA Speaker Series. We are so glad everyone can make it to this event. My name is Kevin Costello, and I am the Student and Alumni Engagement Coordinator here at Florida State University in the Alumni Association. Here with me today is Katie Hines, President of the Student Alumni Association. Hi, Katie.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to our first speaker series event of the 2022 fall semester. We're so blessed to be joined by three members of the FSU Alumni Council this evening, Jake Jarzynski, Leighton Yates, and Aaron Morpeth Provost. We'll be asking our special guest a few questions about their experiences at Florida State University and how they used what they learned at FSU to get where they are now. To our guests in the audience, we ask that you ask any questions you have in the Q&A box. And after we hear from our guest speaker, we'll get into your questions. So to start us off, we're going to let our audience get to know each of you guys a little bit better. So can you tell us about who you are and how you got to where you are today? Jake, we can start with you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jake Jarzynski. I am a graduate from 2015, so it's been about 7 years, which sounds crazy, but I live in Brooklyn. I work for American Express. I graduated with psychology and kind of knew I wanted to do industrial organizational psychology. So I moved up here after graduating and did my master's at Baruch College, master's in IO Psych. And yeah, from there, did a couple internships, recruiting. I did American Red Cross, a Grateful Dead magazine, the United Nations, NBC Universal, and then ended up at American Express. So yeah, I work doing mergers and acquisitions, which again, coming from a psychology background, I did not think I would end up in mergers and acquisitions, but it's been a great ride. I think Florida State's been a big part of it. I am a big supporter of New York City, our New York City based watch parties, clubs, stuff like that. I've got my New York City shirt on tonight. So yeah, really excited to be here and talk about my journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. How about you, Leighton?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Leighton Yates. I'm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. I graduated in 2011, so even further than you, Jake. I've eclipsed the decade mark. It's funny. I went to Florida State as a freshman, looking to be an mechanical engineering major, with dreams of being in the auto industry, and here we are. In 2022, and over a decade later, I'm in the automotive industry, but I'm in a more government affairs role. I graduated in 2011 with a degree in international affairs, so a obvious segue from mechanical engineering into what I ended up doing. Since then, I've lived in San Antonio, Texas, where I worked for an elected official, a member of the House of Representatives in Texas. That's where I really, got to know the government experience, most notably knowing I didn't want to work in the government. I'd rather work with the government. From there, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I've held various government affairs roles. For those of you that aren't familiar, government affairs is essentially, long-term for lobbying, the nice way to say it. I've worked for a few trade associations representing landscape architects, but most notably the last decade, I've been in the automotive industry. The trade association I previously worked with up until this last spring, we represented all of the major automotive brands in the company, in the United States, I should say. So I handled mostly state policy, going from state capital to state capital. I visited about 46 states thanks to that job, and now I'm in-house with an electric vehicle manufacturer named VinFast, a new exciting electric vehicle manufacturer. And I'm here in North Carolina where we're building our factory. In DC, I was heavily involved in DC Knowles. I was vice president there at one time. That's really where I found my community when I moved to DC. As you will find out when you leave Tallahassee. That's the easy first step once you head out of town. Obviously, I'm the Young Alumni Council with my fellow folks here, Jake and Aaron, and many other people who have walked the same halls as you all. It's been a blast, and Jake, you'll appreciate this. advice before we give you more advice is just remember that nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. So continue to press on, and you'll end up where you're supposed to be.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Erin, what about you?
Yeah, so I guess that makes me the youngest graduate. I graduated from undergrad in 2016, started in 2013, did the whole 3-year thing, which I honestly don't recommend because then you cut your Florida State experience short. So I came in as a psychology major, added religious studies along the way, just thought it was a really interesting topic, loved those classes, so much so that I had the Dodd Hall facade tattooed on my arm. So pretty big Florida State fan, I'd say. But so after finishing undergrad, I ended up staying for my master's degree in mental health counseling over the College of Ed. Got to do my master's internship at FSU's Counseling Center. When I was an undergrad, I was in Renew the whole time, the peer education group at the Counseling Center as well. After master's, decided I needed to get out of Tallahassee for a little bit. So I went out to Austin to start my PhD in counseling psychology. So I've been out in Austin since 2018. And then the way our program works is we have a pre-doctoral internship as our final year. So I matched with FSU's Counseling Center and came right back to Tallahassee. So I've been back since about June, working at the Counseling Center, and it's been the best. Really is such a great feeling to be back on campus and, leave work and hear the Chiefs practicing for that weekend's game and all that good stuff. So pretty much, did what I set out to do coming in, made it all the way to PhD, and I'm almost done. Hoping to stay at FSU actually for the foreseeable future. So if anyone wants to stop by Askew and come see me on the second floor, you're more than welcome to.
Well, thank you. We're happy to have you back in Tallahassee, and thank you to all three of you for those introductions. So since this is a speaker series focused on career advice, we would love to get into some questions for y'all.
Yeah. So first off, and for you, Erin, what is the best piece of career advice you could give to a soon-to-be college graduate?
Sure. So I think one of the best things we can do is be transparent about our mistakes. And one of my mistakes was not really capitalizing on relationships with professors and just sort of people that I was involved with as an undergrad before going to grad school. It ended up working out okay, but once I stayed for my master's, I was able to really emphasize those connections, really strengthen my relationships with mentors, with professors, whoever it might be, people that I wanted to have in my circle moving forward, that I could get advice from, that could write me letters when needed. You kind of really can't underestimate the power of just like one person emailing someone else and saying, hey, this is my student, they're interested in this, can you talk to them? So even if you are not struggling in classes, you're a great student, you don't really feel the need to go to office hours, go to office hours anyway. Just establish a relationship with your professor, establish relationships with, faculty or staff advisors of the organizations that you're involved with, and really strengthen those relationships because they're going to be a lot more important probably than maybe you realize at this point. And maybe you won't need them, but Florida State is such a strong community, and obviously we have connections all over the country, all over the world, and turns out those are really important and really beneficial. So, pay attention to the people that are around you, reach out, even if it feels not great, feels a little anxious, do it anyway. And I think you'll probably be surprised at how beneficial it can be.
Great, thank you. So for you, Leighton, what can current students be doing now to promote career success down the road?
I feel like this could be its own speaker series question. I'm going to say something that carries on, I think, until you retire. Obviously, I'm not there yet, but it's held true so far. And that's be curious and have a want to learn. Once I graduated, I realized how much I didn't know. I've learned so much since I graduated. I can run laps around the classes I took in college and the takeaways I learned from my degree. You're constantly learning, whether that's from people, subject matter. Part of that's just being self-aware, knowing where you could be better, knowing where you're maybe lacking, or an area that you primarily maybe didn't even have any interest in or experience in before, and you want to just take a stab at it to see if that's something you want to add to your repertoire. Because as you grow in your career, you will need to expand that toolbox and the tools in it. You'll have to go out of your comfort zone to learn how to reach a different audience or reach a different objective, and that's going to require you to soak up, what you're working on. Be a sponge. A lot of that also comes back to your failures, learning from your failures. You will fail in your career, and hopefully not drastically, but there will be things that don't turn out how you expect them to be, whether that's something as simple as not meeting a deadline, not getting a job that you interview for, or a promotion that you're going for. Really take the time to reflect on why those things didn't happen and what you could do to make sure it doesn't happen again. What do they say? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result. You have to learn from that and grow for yourself, and that way you can also share that with someone else that comes behind you. I think failure has been one of my greatest tools for learning, and that's largely because I've put myself in situations that taking chances on myself, going for a job that maybe I necessarily wasn't qualified for on paper, but I felt I could do the job, and some of those instances turned out and they were false. I was a perfect person for the job, just because of the requirements on a piece of paper. They may be looking for something beyond that. So you have to set yourself up to fail, but you also have to learn from those as well, and you'll be in a better place when the next challenge comes down the road. And on the learning aspect, the last thing I'll say, similar thread to Aaron, is once you have an idea of what you want to do, if you have that idea, find someone who does what you do and pick their brain about it. Do they like it? What don't they like about it? What are some of the challenges, some of the demands that come with that job, that role? And it'll really give you some perspective on how you may make that next move, make that next step, and set yourself up to be in a better spot.
Yeah, I think if I could kind of like piggyback on that, I think failure definitely happens, but I think embracing the fact that you don't know as much as others. Sometimes it's within your team, sometimes it's outside of your team, but a lot of jobs are about embracing kind of that naivety and then being able to learn and push through it and be eager to do that. One of the quotes that I like is if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I can definitely say that I am usually not the smartest person in the room. So yeah, I think that it's a lot about if you're working for 30 to 40 years, every year is going to be gaining experience, but also learning how much you don't know, learning about how much you didn't know when you graduated. So I think it's a constant evolution of yourself and really the jobs that you're taking on. So yeah, to be able to be self-aware and say, okay, I can go into this, but it can only go up from here is kind of an empowering feeling.
Well, thank you guys. That's some awesome insight. Jake, back to you. Do you have any specific advice related to professional networking?
Yeah, I think so. So Aaron made a really good point around talking to professors, talking to people on campus, talking to people that you aspire to be. I think that there's sometimes a misconception that networking gets you the job, but I think that networking is really about learning about other people's jobs and maybe taking the steps to educate yourself on what they do. Sometimes you might be like, oh, that doesn't sound great, I don't want to do that at all. But sometimes it's giving you insight to say, okay, in order to get to where this person is, here are the steps that I need to take. When I think of networking, in my day-to-day job, I'm really just trying to learn and try to get better at my own job. But I know that as a student, you're also trying to gain access to, okay, well, I know what HR is because I've now talked to this person, and I'm going to go talk to more HR people to get varying experiences and varying understanding, because it's really hard to just know about, whether it's HR or psychology or business from a textbook. You really have to just have that kind of exposure to other people and to people's experiences to get to the places that you want to be. And I think along the way, you'll realize there are so many different diversions that you take in order to get there. I also think that Leighton had a really good point about finding community, and community in the Seminole clubs is definitely something that I have found. I have met a lot of business connections and people within my industry and people outside of my industry that have helped me, really just bounce ideas off of. Unrelated, but I met my wife at a Seminole Club watch party. So she went to Penn State, but I think she wears a lot of garnet and gold. So we'll let her have it. But yeah, so I think that just in general, like when you graduate, that community is there, and that community can be a network, but it can also be more than that. It can be friends, it can be, future family, people in your wedding, things like that. But right, going into networking and thinking about, I'm here to get a job is maybe not the best approach, just because it's rare that happens, but it can give you a lot more than just that.
That is great advice. Thank you. So Erin, back to you. For those unsure about which specific career path they want to take, what is the biggest rule you would suggest they follow?
So I'm going to come at this from the perspective of a therapist, because this is something that comes up a lot with a lot of my students, is this like anxiety and sort of existential dread of what do I want to do with my life? So I would say, even if you're super passionate about something right now and that's what you want to do, you're ready to take that next step into the career, try as hard as you can to not tie your self-worth to whatever job you're in, because that's not where your self-worth comes from. You can love your job, you can be amazing at it, but at the end of the day, that's not what's going to bring you the most fulfillment. It's going to be the relationships that you make. So, I know that's not super specific advice, but when you're sort of feeling that anxiety and feeling really worked up over it, remember that, you're going to have a lot of different jobs in your life, potentially. Maybe you're going to have the same one forever, but you're going to have a lot of different experiences that are going to add up to who you are. And it's not just all going to come from that job. I would say also visit our lovely career center. We have some amazing career advisors. They are mostly trained in the College of Ed in the various psych and mental health programs. They can do assessments with you. They can talk with you. They can, walk you through all the resources that are there. I think, it kind of tends to be an underutilized resource at times. I know everyone's sort of going to job fairs and things, but just walking into the center, if you have an extra few minutes and talking to someone can be a great way to, get some answers that maybe you didn't even know you had questions for, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Thank you. Leighton, back to you. What are lessons that you learned in your first job out of college that you still apply every single day? It doesn't maybe just have to be one lesson, multiple lessons, whatever.
I'll give you a couple. It's been, going on 12 years next year. And some of the things that I learned in that first job, living in San Antonio, working for Representative Garza, I still use today. And some of them will be very basic, and you'll find that they'll be useful throughout your career. And even as a student, make a to-do list. As you grow as a student, as you grow personally, professionally, it only adds distractions. Your life will only get busier. I'm married and I have a baby and I have a dog and a very demanding job and involved with university. And I also have my own personal life and want to keep up with friends. Sometimes you have to put some of that stuff on a list to make sure it gets done. I make a monthly set of goals, a weekly, hit list of what I want to get done. And every day I have a stack of Post-it notes, and each Post-it is for the day I'm on that day. And it helps you stay on task. Hopefully you end up in a place where you are in charge of something or a group of people and leading a group, and you staying on task will help them stay on task and reach our collective goals. That is something I learned very early on because I was a person who liked to do a little bit of everything. and it's hard to do a lot of that stuff if you can't, complete objectives for any of those things. If you take little bites of the apple, of different apples, you're never going to finish the job. So that's a kind of just basic thing I would say. Having gone through the pandemic, I work remotely. I've been working remotely for 3 years. I think it's important throughout your day or at points in your week to take a break for yourself. Whether that's taking a walk, listen to a podcast, or even 20-minute nap. Take a time for yourself. Strong mind, strong body. There will be times where you'll be stretched thin from all of those factors I just mentioned, whether it's work, life, job, family, baby, and you will still have to get everything done because they have to get done. But taking those few key moments for that serenity, level set, bring yourself back down to earth. Those are important. My job requires me to interact with a lot of people. And that can be uncomfortable at times. Some people, really don't want to talk to you, like an elected official who doesn't want to talk about electric vehicles at the time. And some people really do, but you can't be afraid. And my advice is to anybody I've worked with that's under me or new to the job that I do, don't be afraid to introduce yourself to someone. Whether it's just an intro, hey, I'm Leighton, who are you here with? This is who I work with, or it doesn't even have to be in a work setting. You never know who that person will be. Similar, going back to Jake's networking, you never know where that conversation will take you, what door that might open down the road, whether that becomes a friend or whether that becomes someone you reach out to for a next role. If you're looking to change careers or change jobs, you never know. So even on your worst day, you may not feel like talking to someone, but if you find yourself in those situations, make sure you just introduce yourself or say hi. It goes a long way. Moving from DC to North Carolina, you really see a lot of it. In DC, a lot of people have tunnel vision. It's hard enough to get eye contact, let alone a hi. So being down here, my wife, she's very much appreciative of the Southern hospitality, but everybody doesn't make that step, and it's much appreciated, and it can really surprise you at times. And something I learned early on is, find a mentor. Someone, it doesn't have to be someone you strongly confide in, but someone that you can go to and, bounce ideas off of. Maybe it's someone that went to school with you. Maybe you're a little older. Maybe it's a teacher, a professor, your boss, or a coworker. You don't know what you don't know. So going to someone who's been there, done that, or even in a similar situation to you, it can really open your eyes to how you can handle situations in life, professionally and personally. And, I know people that are 50 years old that still talk to their mentors, and, I still talk to mine. And those are just some of the basic ones I would share with you that have, really carried me to where I am today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that answer. So I wanted to pause here really quick and remind our audience that there's the Q&A button at the bottom. So feel free to type some more questions in the chat. I know our guests would love to answer questions from you guys. But anyway, back to you, Jake. In terms of searching for jobs, where would you recommend our upcoming graduates look for job postings? Do you think one website is better than the rest, or are there a few out there that you would highly recommend to us?
You're on mute, Jake.
Thanks. I think that's a great question. I think the questions in the chat are really good. So I'm going to try to be really tactical and be really specific in some of my answers. And this might not apply to everybody. And maybe Aaron, if there's any advice that you have for people looking into counseling, that might be better than kind of my business centered advice, definitely chime in. But I think, for one, LinkedIn seems to be predominantly where people are recruiting now. I would say that having your resume ready in a PDF document, definitely go to the Career Center because they do a really awesome job. But then taking that and then just putting it into LinkedIn, I think is super valuable, because that's really what people are searching when they're looking for people. And the other thing too is, the way that the like applicant tracking systems work, say for a company like NBC, if you want to intern at NBC, what they look for are keywords. So they'll search things like media experience or local news stations in the place that they're looking to have interns. Like they'll look for very specific things that prove that people know the job. And so one piece of advice that I have for people that were looking for jobs at like NBC is do the stuff on campus, because I think that gives you an opportunity to practice your voice. It gives you opportunity to have some leadership skills and to really learn how to interact with people. I think that that is really valuable. I think one thing that I wish I had more of was the internship experience or the the hands-on experience with the companies that I kind of admired. Whether it was like for the way that I got to NBC was I interned at a small like music magazine, but I made it into the filters for NBC because I had like media and entertainment and things like that. And so while nobody at the time really knew what like Relics magazine was or anything like that, that had those kind of keywords that set me up into the filters and then got me into the interview process. So, right, like when I'm thinking about networking, as somebody who works at American Express, sometimes people say, how do I get the job at Amex? My advice is to really get some sort of like experience within the industry, whether it's finance, whether it's credit cards or something, travel and lifestyle services, which Amex does a lot of. Take that experience at a smaller scale, especially while there's opportunity when you're in college, whether it's an internship or entry level, and then be able to use that experience and use that line on the resume to be able to get into the filters for American Express. Because a lot of the ways that, like, I really don't have that much weight to be able to say, oh, like, Erin's really great, here's her resume, I pass it on to a recruiter, but it might not be the right timing for someone with Erin's background. It might not be the right fit, or she might not have the right experience. So anybody that wants like a specific industry or a specific company, one, I would say get like a micro experience however you can early in your career, and then that will use that as kind of a stepping stone. And the other piece of advice that I have is really just to I guess to if you're making those inroads with those people, then you're able to kind of take it to the next step. And that's really what I had to do, is get all these varying experiences. If I wanted to work at Amex, or if I wanted to work at ESPN, or wanted to work at some cool company, I would go to LinkedIn, I would look at what their stepping stones were, and I'd try to follow that, or I'd ask them for advice. And even if they didn't give me advice, then I'd look at somebody else and I'd try to talk to them. So I think cold applying and cold networking can work, but what's really valuable is kind of getting those micro experiences that add up into something that that can be a career or the job that you really want.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna now get into the chat questions. As a reminder, if you guys have any questions that you haven't asked yet, feel free to pop them in the Q&A portion. And for this, we're kind of gonna go at it as whoever wants to jump in and answer it. All three of you guys can answer it. But our first question is, what is your biggest tip for interviews?
I'll go first. My biggest tip for interviews is, you're going to be prepared to answer questions and research the company. Go in with your own questions. And they don't have to be a standard set of questions. If you're curious about a company enough to apply, you have that interest there, whether it's about their culture. If someone is interviewing you that is going to be doing a similar role, ask them what they like about it, what they don't like about it, what the challenges are, and, what they hope to eventually be in that company or that organization. I think that can go a long way. In companies, from the ones I've at least encountered, they want people who really want to know about the business or the job function or the organization's goals, and how you can be a part of that. Going in with some curiosity goes a long way.
I think that's a good point. I think another thing that I would add is one, practice, talk to the Career Center, they do mock interviews. But really, I think that what comes across really strong is it's confidence. I feel like being nervous is totally expected and totally fine. But I think it's kind of confidence in what you know and what you do and talking to your own strengths. So I wouldn't necessarily try to say I have strengths that I don't, but if I can talk really confidently about the things that I do know, then I think that comes across as, okay, even if this person doesn't check all the boxes as far as who I'm looking for in an applicant, I know that they have the ability to learn and be confident in what they do because they're telling me about it. So don't worry if there's something that they're asking for that you might not have. And sometimes it's really just not the right fit for the role. They're looking for something really specific and you might not have it. So don't take it too seriously if you don't get the role. But right, I would just practice and be confident in your own experiences and be able to speak to them well. And then they'll take that as, okay, this person has the ability to learn. They have the interest in what they're talking about and what we're offering. That's kind of, as a recruiter or as an interviewer, what I kind of look for in terms of whether they are talking about what I am offering or whether they're talking about something completely different.
Yeah, I would definitely second everything Jake just said, especially the piece about, coming in confident, even if you feel nervous, sort of fake it till you make it type of thing. I just got through doing it was 13 interviews in January, back to back for internship matching for psychology, and it is exhausting. But a lot of the feedback that I got when I was able to get some feedback was that I came across as really personable. And when I went into these interviews, I didn't try to hide parts of my personality. If it, felt appropriate, I might, sort of crack a small joke or something. I think humor really goes a long way when it's used appropriately. And just connecting with people, because if you try to act in a way that's not who you are, people are going to be able to tell. So just trying to be yourself in a way that, yeah, it's professional, you're in an interview, but letting pieces of your personality come through, because employers want to know, how are you going to work with everyone else? Are you going to fit with this team, with this company, with this center, wherever it is? What is your personality going to be? Because it's not just, sitting at your desk and never interacting with anyone. So, being confident and letting your personality come out is really important. I saw someone asked about what's your weakness related to interviews, and how to answer that question. So in psychology interviews, we would phrase it as what's your growth edge? So what are you hoping to grow in? And so even if they ask you, what's your biggest weakness? I would respond with well, some areas that I'm hoping to really grow in with this job opportunity would be such and such, maybe talk about some ways where you have already started learning and addressing that growth edge, giving some examples. But, I'd really like to continue building up this growth edge with this opportunity. And I think that my strengths in these areas can really help me to build up those weaknesses, those growth edges. So, framing it kind of in a sly way where these things really become your strength in a way.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna take that growth edge. My favorite interview question to ask interviewers, going back to Leighton, definitely go in with a bunch of questions, but one question that I have, especially if you're kind of later in the process, is there anything on my, is there anything about my resume that gives you hesitancy or any experience that I don't have? And sometimes they'll say, oh, well, yeah, we kind of wish you had a little bit more data and analytics experience. And then that gives you an opportunity to say, oh, well, I actually do have that. Or no, but I'm, interested in learning, and that's something that I can build on, or talking to that. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a sneak peek as to, maybe what some other candidate that they're looking at might have. And then for you to be able to talk about it and say, yeah, I could be just as good as that person.
Well, thank you guys. Another question we have, and this is for our psychology graduates here. What would you consider to be healthy benchmarks for a psychology degree? For example, when should I go for internships, or when should I look for actual jobs in the psychology field? And for context, the person who asked that question is a sophomore and wants to become a psychiatrist.
So this is really actually very tough as an undergrad because there's not a lot of clinical experiences that you can get without being licensed or being in a program, in a graduate program. And I remember feeling sort of panicked of like, what do I do? So, looking for things that sort of closely relate to that. I mean, Renew is a great option because it is mental health, emotional wellness related. You're working in the counseling center, working with other, licensed professionals who are supervising Renew students, things like that. I worked at 211 Big Ben, the crisis line, because anybody can do that. You just have to do the training. It is pretty intense, but that is something you can do without a license. And, doing that throughout undergrad. I don't think there's any reason to wait until a certain point. As soon as you can jump on it and it feels, manageable with your schedule, looking for these opportunities. I would say also graduate programs really want to see research, so being involved in directed individual study, if you can get involved with Europe, volunteering as a research assistant, they really want to see that. Even if you're not wanting to do research, they're going to look for it and they're going to need to see it. It's also a really good way to build up some of those relationships that I was talking about, working with other grad students, working with professors. So make sure you have some kind of research on your resume somewhere, whatever it looks like, looking for opportunities that are closely associated with mental health as much as you can. And, trying to think outside the box with these opportunities, because it is really hard to get those clinical experiences as an undergrad. I can very much empathize with that.
I would echo the research piece, because I think that's really, it's a really good opportunity, whether you want to do like counseling or you want to go into grad school and do research. Like you get a feel for what you're going to be doing in grad school. You're going to be doing research. You're going to be looking at data. For me, I think that I found that I liked the data, but I felt like, I wanted to apply it to something more than like an individual. And that's how I ended up, kind of pivoting to business and to HR. So I think that, right, those experiences are really valuable in terms of getting to what your dream job is right now, but you might find other ways that research influences your own career path and what you want to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Kind of piggybacking off a question from earlier, any additional advice on networking?
Leighton, what's the best connection that you've made just randomly, like at a Florida State watch party or something?
At a Florida State watch party, I mean, I think I had a benefit to myself because it was in Washington, D.C., and my job is very government related. It was also at a time when a lot of graduates from my era of FSU were also in DC at the same time. We had the benefit of being able to bounce ideas and opportunities and share those with each other. While it is competitive, if you want to put a name to it, being with people who do or are trying to do the same things as you, because they're also at these networking events. There's people who do what you want to do and people who are in the same place as you, and people who have no clue. I think it was good for like-minded people in that same room to be able to bounce ideas, bounce experiences off each other. If I met someone who worked in policy in the education space, I'm not necessarily interested in education. I've always been interested in automotive or environmental or transportation, but I know my friend Melissa is a diehard education policy person. I could say, hey, you should go meet that person or introduce them. You can be an asset, and never down the road she may meet someone who works for an automotive company that she'll make sure that I meet if we're in the same room. I think it's knowing the crowd. As I mentioned, you're going to introduce yourself to so many strangers and random people. Some of them you may never talk to again, but just remembering a name and where they worked goes a long way. And just kind of going from that thread, I always joke with my wife, she's extremely personable. If you met her 20 years ago, she could tell you your first and last name, where you went to college, your favorite food, and the name of your dog. In networking, when you meet these folks, remember her name and, something interesting about them, whether it's where they worked or maybe it's a fact they told you, perhaps they're from Jacksonville, Florida, like me. Maybe they have been lived in New York for a while, and just that one thing that can tie you back to them if you do run into them again, because you'll experience in college, if you haven't already, someone you've met and you meet them again and you're like, wow, I don't remember your name, I know your face. And so you have to find creative ways to get that name out. And that's a whole nother tactic, but remembering who you meet, not just making them empty handshakes.
Yeah, you made a good point on I feel like you mentioned like talking with peers. I think that's really important. Like people that are at your level, whether it's right now, the way that you're networking, you're in SAA, that's great. Keep that going. I feel like my grad school cohort, where all of us were kind of interested in the same thing. I wouldn't have called it networking at the time, but now that I think about it, like I've made really strong network and friends that, there were other people that were, they were going home. And I think that I made really close friendships, but also a really strong network with the people that, whether we were tired, we went out for a beer after, or we met up for a coffee right before class. Like those are the kinds of things that, they start as friendships, but you realize how important they are to your career and seeing how things evolve over time.
Thank you, guys. So for the next question, in terms of preparing for your career, if you could go back to college and do a couple things differently, what would you do or not do?
I would take Aaron's advice and build better relationships with my professors. There are some classes I enjoyed a lot and still draw from today, just because of how this teacher, he or she, taught that lesson or that semester. And I would love to be able to go back to them now and pick their brain about things. I know I have some friends who were very close with their professors and still speak to them to this day and are still using them as a mentor to draw from, whether that's advice, whether that's just to talk about a current event in their area of expertise, and just have that discourse. But that's something I wish I would have done better, is build relationships with the professors that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, definitely that. I mean, that's probably the only regret I have from college, that and not joining the circus. If you can join the circus, definitely do that, just because. But yeah, emphasizing those relationships again. I think one of the things I would have done, just being in grad school now and having done that, I talked myself out of doing a honors thesis when I was an undergrad, because I was like, why would I do that? That's crazy. That's too much work. Okay, well, I just finished a 300-page dissertation. Like the honors thesis is totally manageable. That's another way to really, get those relationships. You're working really closely with somebody, you're getting research, you're learning a ton of valuable skills, whether it's how to do research, writing, critiquing research. Like I think it would have been really helpful to have. So if that's something that you're like on the fence about, I would say definitely pursue it. Even if you're not in the honors program, I'm pretty sure you can still do a thesis. So think about it, don't underestimate yourself.
I would say I didn't utilize the Career Center that much. I feel like I've been plugging them, and it's really partly based on the fact that I know now that they're, I think, like the #2 rated Career Center in the country. They do the mock interviews, they have connections to internships, they have connections to the professors on campus who can help you get the internships. They have grants to be able to do an internship in a city that you don't live in. So you could come up to New York and take an internship up here. So yeah, I feel like I could have visited them a little bit more. Their resume stuff was great, but I could have done a little bit more there. I also think that internships, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but trying to get an internship, whether it's on campus, whether it's somewhere in Tallahassee, somewhere back home over the summer. I think that's really valuable to get that line item on your resume and get those kind of micro experiences that build up to a big corporate job or the dream job that you're looking for.
I would add to, it just occurred to me, yes, you have to have, a decent GPA, get the grades that you need to get. But when you're getting into your career, at that point, nobody's asking you really about your GPA. Maybe they want to see it on your resume. Everyone's asking you, what experiences did you have? What are your skills? How are you going to apply this? No one's like, did you get an A in statistics, right? So yes, it's important. Do what you need to do, but it's not the end all be all, at not even close. So don't put too much extra pressure on yourself for those grades. Think about the experiences more.
Definitely back that answer up. Since I've left Tallahassee, no one has ever asked me what my GPA was. But they do take note of how you interact with people, how you work with people, how organized you are, how you manage your time. Do well in school is an obvious one, but make sure you're taking, full advantage of what's around you. You're in a place surrounded by so many different types of people. Take advantage of those experiences and those different personalities you'll encounter, and put yourself out there. It'll pay off.
And what is that phrase about? What do you call a doctor who made B's in all of their classes? Doctor.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that answer. So Jake, going back to you and on the topic of internships, we do have someone in the chat that is interested in the entertainment and sports industry and is looking at an internship with NBC or a network like it. So what kind of advice do you have for someone trying to attain an internship like that?
Yeah, I would say one, that's exactly what I wanted to do. The first thing that I would do is go to LinkedIn and look at the interns that are already there now in the types of jobs that you want. If you follow them on LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, Instagram, you can sometimes see okay, this is their name, you find them on LinkedIn. You can stalk, that's totally within the rules. And then, see what their experiences were in college, what kind of clubs they did. And, maybe you'll see that they did, something local. So whether it's working for a local news station or the FSU radio station, that's media and entertainment. And any ability to kind of put that on the resume is something that's going to get you through the filters into the applicant pool. So I think there was 20,000 people that would apply to NBC internships every semester, and half of them were people that were just oh, sounds like a cool place to work, but they didn't have any kind of experience in media that set them apart. So I think that's what I would advise, but also do something that sets you apart even a little bit from that, right? Because we do have a ton of people that have that media experience. Is there anything that makes you special? Maybe you have media experience, but you also have statistics experience. So now maybe they'll put you on the sports desk, right? Because stats, you can talk numbers. So things like that one, get you through the filters, but then two, set you apart. And then you're connected to people within that industry. You're connected to the work. You're seeing what you like, what you don't like. And you're able to kind of take that and run with it. I think that's kind of the first step. And I think my incorrect thought was that it happened after graduation, but it definitely can happen before graduation.
Well, thank you. All right, we have two more questions. So the first one is, what is your best advice for negotiating future salary and benefits when you are weighing career offers from employers?
I have no input on that because grad student, sorry.
I don't know, Leighton, you want to go first?
Yeah, it's the toughest part of the interview process. You're at the point where you can discuss that. The internet is your friend. There are tools out there that you can search and see what comparable roles pay with companies. How updated those are, you don't know, but it's at least a starting point. Everyone always tells you, the first person the name and number loses. I've been in situations where you can't get through the application portal without putting a number in a box, and you have to. Other times, you can use that. It's negotiable based on what you're offering. Part of it's, being self-aware. If you have friends in that area, and you're comfortable enough asking them that question, ask them. But there is no one size fits all to that question. I think be realistic while being somewhat ambitious at the same time. Know your worth, know what you bring to the table, and know that just because if you are the first person to say a number, you can always come back to that. If you get your offer letter and you don't feel that's the number that you think you're worth, or the role and its responsibilities reflect that number, go back to them and address that. The worst they can say is no, and you have a job offer. And on the flip side, you may be able to have some flexibility, whether that's other benefits that company may be able to offer you outside of just a salary. Some companies offers signing bonuses or shares within a company, or other benefits. So definitely weigh more than just that salary number, because there are other great perks that you may value more in the long run.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I would say it definitely, when you're starting out, I would be kind of conservative in terms of what you want to ask for until you get to the point where, they're offering you the job. I think then you can kind of raise it. At that point, you kind of have the power, just because it's really hard to find the perfect fit for a role. And so if you get to the final interview and they are saying like, okay, we're starting to talk about salary, it's not going to be like the salary isn't going to be the tiebreaker. So I would go in a little bit high, because that is really what you're worth, especially right now. I think that people are fighting for talent. So definitely think about it in terms of, if you are the perfect fit, they will meet your number, or they will realistically tell you how high they can go. So I would say, be confident in that approach and don't undersell yourself and your qualities. And generally, I know that like in New York, we're now going to we're sharing our salary ranges in the posting. So yeah, I would just say that we're becoming a culture where we're more transparent about salary. So it's okay to ask. It's okay to ask for more. And then when you are, I would also say HR teams are generally told not to decide between people's numbers, right? So if you find the perfect fit, like you try to pay them. So yeah, I think, yeah, be confident in that and overshoot it if you have to.
Well, thank you. All right, 2 more, and we'll cut it at that. I'm going to combine these questions. What if you don't know what you want to do? And if so, where is a good place to start?
The Career Center. Definitely the Career Center. I think also too, if I was working with a student, and counseling on this, I would start with like, what are your values? What are things that make you feel, accomplished? What are things that make you feel joyful? What do you value in life? And then start there. What are some jobs that maybe align with those values? Another great, I think, underutilized resource, if you're wanting to sort of try things out, especially with like organizations on campus, set up a consultation with student engagement. They can do individual consultations to help you find organizations on campus that are in line with maybe some interests you've been thinking about, things you're maybe not sure about, you want to try. So look around for those resources. I think we've all mentioned talking to people. That's why these relationships are so important, because you can get a lot more insight that might point you in a direction. But I think, I would start with the values. What do you like doing? What makes you happy in your day-to-day life? And, go from there, sort of shape that direction.
Yeah, I would say, Leighton said it earlier, curiosity, be interested in learning and be interested in learning the things that you want to learn more about and kind of follow those opportunities. If you would have told me I would be doing mergers and acquisitions, I would say, no, I failed financial accounting, so I'm not going to do mergers and acquisitions. So I think that, right, careers take funny paths, follow the things that interest you, and they might take you in a different direction than you initially thought. But right, I think that I went into psychology because I cared about people. That was kind of the values that I wanted to follow. And now I'm working for Amex, supporting people as they go through a crazy time of like an acquisition. So I'm still following my values and still doing what I really like, which is working with people and, you know, helping them through change and transition and things like that. But it's in a much different way than I thought I would be doing it. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't said yes to certain opportunities along the way.
Yep, ditto to a lot of what you all said. And just to kind of reiterate something I said earlier was, even if you've got a tad bit of curiosity about what someone does, just ask them about it. And maybe that'll get you down a path of learning more and seeing if that's something you can realistically do, combining your skill sets and your interests and what you're good at, being self-aware, knowing if you're a people person, you probably should be in a field where you're interacting with people, whether that's helping them, consulting them, or even, you know, an HR role. You know, there's so many ways to get at it. Knowing who you are is a big part of it. So there are people who will get 10 years into their career and then make a complete change because they've come to that realization, and it happens differently for everybody. So just have an open mind and seek out the answers that you're looking for.
Awesome. All right, last question for everyone. What is the best way to approach a recruiter?
I will say, if the recruiter is going back to the best websites to find a job, LinkedIn, usually in most cases, they'll have the recruiter's name attached to that job posting. If they're going to put their name on that posting, that opens a door for you to message them and ask them a question. So don't be shy. I will tell you this, if you don't ask them a question, they're not going to reach out to you and ask you if you have any questions. So take that shot. You know, you may find out what they're looking for isn't a fit for you or for them. You may find out a little more than the job posting gives on. So don't be shy and put yourself out there. You know, the worst they can say is no, or tell you something that, you know, at the end of the day might save you some time of going to the monotonous application portals and reworking your resume and working on a cover letter. At the end of the day, you may be in a better spot.
They might also say, well, looking at your LinkedIn, you don't have data and analytics, but you'd be nice for this role over here. So I'll put your name into this bucket. So it's right. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's about right opportunity, right time. So yeah, cold emailing or cold messaging the recruiters, it doesn't work all the time, but it's worth a shot. There's nothing to lose there.
Don't have as much insight because recruiting is not really something that happens quite as much in psychology. But I mean, same principles apply. Put yourself out there, email folks that work at places you're interested in, and just, you know, take the chance. The worst they can say is no. Also, this is Landis, in case anyone's wondering.
Great name.
Well, thank you, everyone. And that'll do it. Once again, thank you, everyone in the audience, for coming out and joining us. A special thanks to Jake, Leighton, and Aaron for joining us tonight as our guest speakers. To close us out, as always, go Knowles.